Shalom, call law, Yahweh Bashim Yahushai, Bahashim Kwadash. Double honors to the elder apostles and elder bishops of GMS, including the elders that came before them that taught us his truth. Shalom and salutations to all the brothers out pushing the word and truth and in sincerity, the hopeful elect, tabernacle of David. The Aquath that are listening and learning being a pillar of rest, the 144,000. The hopeful elect, the 1/3. And I'm the brother Yahshua. I'm back with the WW3 Daily Update. Shalom and salutations to you all. Today is War and Rumors of War Tuesday. We start at Matthew 24 and 6. And ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. The famous line. See that ye be troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. And we go in, we look at some of these different versions. NIV says rumors of war. NLT says threats of war. So we have rumors and threats. And move down. Aramaic says reports. Rumors, threats, reports, and news of battles far away. So we got news, rumors, reports, and threats. Let's listen to some. This is General Douglas McGregor. Ukrainian army collapses 3 days ago. And it's his professional opinion, if you will. And here you got a comment. Douglas McGregor is a brilliant historian, soldier, warrior, whom I hope finds a high position in the next Trump administration. Yeah. All right. Anyway, so let's listen to his take. Take it away, Doug.
The question that comes up is what happens if Ukraine really loses? If the army is on its knees, Zelensky is at the end of everything. Will the Americans accept Ukrainian defeat, or do you see a scenario where NATO will then move in, or NATO states like Poland that they will not accept Ukrainian defeat?
Well, if you look at the polls that are underway in Europe right now, particularly in Poland, the Polish electorate's opinion has changed dramatically over the last few months. At some point, they were more than 68% willing to directly engage in the war if necessary. Today, 56% of Poles who are voters in Poland have said, well, we'll continue to support the Ukrainians, but we will not, under any circumstances, intervene in Western Ukraine with Polish troops.
Of your food going to waste? Freeze drying could be your answer. There are a few different ways of preserving food. First, you can dehydrate. A dehydrator uses heat to slowly dry out food. The heat ends up destroying a lot of the food's nutritional value and shrinks and toughens the food. And most foods can't even be dehydrated, like soup, cheese, and ice cream. You can also try home canning. Canning also uses heat, which, once again, destroys nutrition. Canning is hot, messy, and requires careful attention to detail. Canning, when not done correctly, can even cause botulism or other illnesses. The very best way to preserve food is freeze drying. Freeze drying is able to keep all of the nutrients, since it removes the water from food at freezing temperatures, instead of using heat. Plus, freeze drying is easy and allows you to preserve all your favorite foods. Fruits, vegetables, leftovers, soups, casseroles, you name it. And all of it will last years longer than either dehydrated or canned food.
You rule this kingdom.
Lock you. Damn it. Bear with me.
The Poles had an election on the 15th of October. I have a feeling that we're going to learn a great deal from that election, and this current government that has been prosecuting this war against Russia and Ukraine may find itself in a very fragile position. My point is, I think the European electorates have begun to say, we really don't want to go to war with Russia. So why are you going to war with Russia? It has not yet caught up with Chancellor Scholz, whose approval rating at this point is about 31%. But I suspect on the current track, if the Germans continue on the current track with their government, he won't last. I think Mr. Macron is in a very weak position right now. I'm surprised he's still there. And that has to do with more than just the Russia issue, but with domestic problems. And I think the domestic problems in all the West European countries are going to grow worse as a result of the economy and the oil and gas problem, the energy problem. So my view is, I think the Europeans, if they elect the right people and put them in power, can end this thing. But Washington won't. No one in Washington is prepared to stand up and say, well, you know, we were wrong. We misjudged Russia. Our underlying assumptions were wrong. Russia is not just a gas station with nuclear weapons. Russia is a rich and powerful state, rich in resources, has the best technology, has excellent weaponry, has good forces. Its population is firmly behind its government. So I think in our case, no one will say that. And so they would rather let it drag on and drag on and drag on. And at some point, they'll change the subject here. That's what happened to us in Vietnam.
Yeah.
I mean, I lived through that. Suddenly we stopped talking about Vietnam, and everybody said, what happened to Vietnam? I often ask people, what happened to the global caliphate? Oh, well, that's gone. Now Russia's number one. Well, wait a minute now. Russia's not the big problem. It's really China. China, that's the problem. I think you're going to hear more of that nonsense. We have a bad habit of behaving this way. Remember, we're a maritime power, historically, like the British. We sail into the place, we do things, and when things go badly for us, we sail home. You live there. Remember what Charles de Gaulle said. The problem for Europe is Britain is an island and Americans don't live in Europe. That's still a huge problem. You need to wake up. That's the problem with all these alliance structures.
Yeah. And we see now that some kind of blame game seems to have started. Also from Washington, people saying Zelensky is not doing a good job. I talked to Viktor Orban recently. I asked him, what is the main lesson you took from this war? And he said to me, well, the main lesson is that Europe doesn't exist. Europe has just vanished from the stage. We do not exist anymore. It's a terrible experience. What is the most important lesson you took out of this war so far?
Well, it's interesting that Orban made the comment he did, because I think it was in the 1870s, Gorshakov, who was the foreign minister for the Tsar at the time, sent a letter along with a document for his inspection to Chancellor Bismarck. And the note said, what happened to the concert of Europe? He was decrying the fact that all Europeans were not united and so forth. And Bismarck wrote in the margins, what is the concert of Europe? Right? Europe has never been Europe. Europe breaks down, and I grow so tired of this. I remember sitting in Vienna, listening to enthusiastic Austrians extolling the virtues of the euro, and the euro would be a big success, and Europe was going to be united on and on and on back in 1998, 1999. And I said, well, you have different cultural spheres. The view from Berlin is not the same as the view from Madrid. The view from Rome is different from the view in Berlin. The view from Stockholm is closer to Berlin's view. Now, the point is, I see Europe breaking down into different security zones. When I was at Supreme Headquarters Allied Powers Europe, we once concluded that there was only one unifying force in the NATO alliance. That was almost universal dislike of France, because it was no longer an enemy in Russia. I mean, I think people are unrealistic in Europe to think that these things don't matter. Culture, religion, ethnicity, language, all of these things are meaningful. We have tried to paper it over. And unfortunately, many of you have tried to imitate us. And I think that's gotten you into a lot of trouble. You're Europeans. You are not the United States of Europe. You're not Americans. We, on the other hand, I think have not learned anything. We are beginning to have a groundswell of support in the electorate for what I would call non-intervention. People are beginning to say, well, wait a minute, why are we doing this? We intervened in Vietnam. That didn't work out well. We intervened all over the Middle East. The place is a disaster. Everywhere we go, we create conditions that are worse than the ones that we found. Countries that were formerly either disinterested in us or neutral have now become enemies. So why are we doing this? That hasn't hit Washington yet. I think when we go through our financial crisis again, which I think is going to be much worse than 2008, you will see more and more of that in the United States.
All right, good enough. So that's Dougie Doug's opinion there, and I think he's over the target. So, I mean, you know, everybody has an opinion. So, we'll just end it right here. Let's see. Let's go to Joel, as we do in this thing. Here's what's going on, nonetheless. NATO ain't going to let it go. NATO's going to expand this war, right? When munitions run out and it's no longer Russia against Ukraine, which it never was, then they'll have to put a new name on it, and the new name is going to be World War III. Joel 3 and 9, proclaim this among the nations, prepare for war, rouse the mighty men, let all the men of war, let all the men of war advance and attack. Okay? Joel 3 and 2, I will gather all the nations and bring them down into the valley of Jehoshaphat. There I will enter into judgment against them concerning my people, my inheritance Israel, whom they have scattered among the nations, as they divided up my land. Okay, that's the reason why God is conducting World War III. All right, so with that, we hope that the elect ratified you, brothers and sisters. Shalom.